Hey everybody, welcome back to the garage. So, on the ongoing series of videos on the brakes and suspension on the 300ZX Turbo behind me here, today we are going to be removing the struts, front strut. Okay, so today's video we're going to be getting the front strut out on the 86 300ZX Turbo here. Now, it's a turbo. This is the electronically adjustable struts that you cannot buy anymore and you can't rebuild anymore. So once they're done, and these are well and truly done, they're 37 years old, they're done, leaked all the fluid out of them, you have to convert them to something else, conventional or coil springs. I'm converting them with KYB cartridges that are going to go into the existing strut here. I'm putting lowering springs on. So I'll show you what I run into doing it and how I managed to do this here. I will show you what I find here, and hopefully it'll be a little clearer. It'll be a little clearer for me, maybe for someone else too, on how you convert these old turbo vehicles to a more conventional suspension. Okay, so I've already got all the brake system off, calipers, rotor, the dust shield at the back. That's all been removed right now, and there are separate videos on that. So if you're going to be doing this and you're not sure how those videos cover it, I just have broken them down into separate shorter videos. So it's if someone's just doing brakes, they don't have to wade through everything. Likewise here, if you're already at this point and you're wondering how you're getting this out, hopefully this video will help. So the next step is the struts attached to the steering knuckle here with two bolts up underneath here. So we're going to get those two out. That will effectively free the bottom of the strut. We're going to have to remove this trailing link here, or trailing rod that goes forward here. We'll have to remove that to allow the lower control arm to drop enough to pop this whole strut out, and we'll put a jack underneath it so it doesn't just drop, and then we can gently lower it once we get the top done. The brake line is already disconnected. It was done to take the brakes off because I removed the calipers completely to clean and paint them as part of the brake rebuild. So if you're not doing that, there is a clip back here that you'll want to come out, remove, so that you can release the flexi brake lines out of the way and move the caliper out of the way. Anyway, what we need right now, 17mm socket, and we're going to be removing the two nuts underneath here to release this, I call it a trailing rod, but it controls the fore-aft motion of the lower control arm. So we release that first. Okay, that's those two off. Now, I probably have said it before, but I'll say it again. This is a West Coast car. It's been on Vancouver Island, so there's no rust in it. Unfortunately, a lot will probably fight bolts a lot more than I'm fortunate not to have to do, but same process applies. Just probably more force and more brute force to get some off. All right. Let's have a go. Okay. Surprisingly not that difficult. That one's really a tight fit there. At least for my impact. Alright, I'm just going to leave that in for a second while we go up top. Okay, so under the hood with the turbo, you'll find this kind of a cap here with the wires going in it. Ignore this stuff, that's all got to be dealt with later. The ongoing list of things to do. So 3 nuts here, 17mm socket. That should remove this cover, and we should be able to see underneath there to the strut. If it's a non-turbo, you won't have this cover. You just have the 3 nuts here to remove, and the strut will be removable. Oops, almost dropped that. I guess, needless to say, the battery should be disconnected before you're messing around with any of this stuff. There we go. Okay, so that's the plug. What you have to do is squeeze, it's sitting on here, you squeeze these two together. I just used some needle nose pliers to squeeze, and it releases this little end piece here, and that comes up, and that's what you're left with there. Okay, so just going to lower the scissor jack I have under here and see it should start to drop. Okay, so predictably this put up a fight. So what I ended up doing is putting the strut back up in place, just hand tightening the bolts back up in there, and then using a small persuader, banged it till it comes loose. It looks like there's a, not a press fit, but at least a reasonably tight fit of a sleeve up under here. So I've done that, and then if I release this and jiggle this a little bit, there we are, it's now loose. So okay, so now I should be able to push this down. There we go, and here we go. That's the strut out. Alright, so here's the strut. So next step, we're going to compress the spring and get the mounting plates, bearing and everything off. As you can see, the bump stop has disintegrated, actually fallen apart, and the bellows here are in pieces. So anyway, so it's a weird spring. I mean, it's like 1, 2, 3 coils, so I can't get from the bottom to the top with this. I can't fit it in there, so I'm hoping I can compress it enough this way I can get that top nut off. Okay, so I did manage to get my spring compressor in on 2. Compress the spring there. Because I'm not using this cartridge again, I wasn't too worried about damaging that shaft, so I just put a vice grip on. And then my impact on the nut at the top here, and this has come off. This is the entire upper mount with the nuts off now. So just release everything and I'll take the spring off. And I guess just like everybody always says, just be careful working with these springs here. There's a lot of energy pent up in there when you start to compress them. So as always, be careful. Okay, so once we've got the strut out, we've got the spring off, the next step is to remove the gland nut so we can get the old cartridge out and start the process of converting this strut over. Alright, so trying to get the gland nut out here. Resorted to the pipe wrench on the actual nut, and then what I did here is I just put a tube on the end of the spindle to stop it rotating so it doesn't all lift up and everything when you're doing that. And I can put a foot on here, and there we go. All right, it's a little crude, but it works. So that's what the gland nut looks like, and it comes out of one of these adjustable ones. Seal here for the fluid, I guess, that was in it. Now, I'm told when you pull this out, fluid's going to come out. I've read, rather. I guess I don't know if that's true, but just in case, I put this small little tray down. Don't make a huge mess. So let's get this cartridge out, see what it looks like. Alright, so I didn't manage to actually capture this on video, but what I did, I stood this up. I took the upper spring plate here, threw it on with a nut, and then I stood on the bottom here with both my foot on each ear, and I just pulled this up a few times and it slowly worked the cartridge and the seals for the cartridge up out. That seemed the easiest way to do it, and a bit like a slide hammer almost. And it's, there we go. So you're trying to get that O-ring there out. So that's how much fluid came out of the strut tube when I turned it upside down there. So always good to have something to catch it in, I guess, because that will make a bit of a mess. Okay, at this point, I just want to let you know the oil that comes out, it smells. And it's the kind of smell that doesn't wash off easily. You get it on your hands, you get it on your clothes. You wash your hands. I've laundered my jeans several times. The smell's still there. So just letting you know. So just trying to make sure all the fluids that I can get out of the strut tube is out. This is the new cartridge, KYB. That one. I'll put this in the description anyway. But this is the cartridge that slides in to replace it, and it comes with a new gland nut and a new nylock rod nut at the top there. So we'll try it. I suspect, just looking at the length of it versus the old one, I have a feeling this has to get ground down or removed. But we'll try it first and see. Maybe the new gland nut works. This is exactly the same. This is just longer because it's got the electronic stuff on the top there. But that's exactly the same. Same flat on it. Same diameters. The old nut fits on the new one. Okay, so now we come to the crux of the issue with converting electronic adjustable suspension to normal suspension, because you can't get these parts. The cartridge comes with that seal gland nut, which I thought was perfect. You know, I thought, oh, well, maybe they've smartened up and they start to do this, but that does not, it's a different thread, does not fit in here. So that leaves you with the old one. Now I've picked all the seals and crap out of that already because it doesn't need that. It doesn't fit. I mean, it'll thread into it. But you compare the two, you'll see there's a much larger diameter here than this is, and deeper, and this is shorter. So what I really need is this modified to effectively this, but just with the old thread on it. Alright, so I've been working away at this. Didn't film it because it would be just boring. But I thought I'd show you what I've personally done to make this work. There used to be a kit called, I think, KYB 108A. And that kit gave you a new gland nut, and I gave you a couple of sleeves for the rear shocks that I haven't even looked at yet. Those kits, like everything else related to these adjustable suspensions, aren't available anymore. They still show up online, but if you actually look or call, like I've done, it says no longer available or out of stock or whatever. You just can't get them anymore. So if you recall, when I showed you the gland nut that came off, it was a pretty hefty unit with a bunch of bearings and seals and whatnot in it. And the one they sent me was a much smaller one, thinner inside, but this thread is wrong. I believe it's 32 mil for the non-adjustable and 35 mil diameter tube on the adjustable suspension. So what I've done is I took the old gland nut and I've cleared it all out inside. Now, I was going to go to try and find a little machine shop that would do it for me, but there's not a lot around here. Where I used to live, I would have been able to call a favor in, no problem, but where I am now, it didn't. So I thought, well, before I do that, I'll have a go. So I took This is a good sized carbide burr. And I just basically put this in the vise and started working and removing all the grooves and all the excess material that's no longer needed when this is purely a retaining nut. No, there's no seal or anything to it. And whilst it's not necessarily the prettiest in the world, it's not bad for done by hand in a vise. And then I cut it shorter so that it doesn't hang up on this here. And then the last thing I had to do is this little nub on the bottom here is probably close to 1/8 of an inch shorter than it was. It's been ground down. I'll just throw some paint on that one and down here. It's been ground down so that this surface sits low enough in the sleeve that this can seat properly and hold everything in place. So that's my homemade 108A kit for the front. I'm going to have to do the same thing on the other side, obviously, when I pull it apart. It was, I'm going to say there's about 4 hours of work invested in that. It's a fair bit of work, a lot of grinding, a lot of chips, but I think it's worked. I think we've got something I can now start to put together. I just got to paint everything up down here. So, many weeks have passed since we last videoed the front strut assemblies and the conversion here. If you've checked any of my other videos, you know I had a big problem trying to order the lowering springs and getting them delivered, and long story, lots of delays, but finally today, yes, the lowering springs showed up. They actually showed up last night by perlator. So actually going to be able to get back on to working on the front suspension now. So this is what's gotten done. The strut has all been painted and cleaned up. Threw on a gold paint I had here and then a nice clear coat on it. Everything else has all been painted, cleaned up, and we're all ready to start the assembly process here. Alright, so first step, obviously, we're going to get the KYB strut, the one that was modified slightly on the bottom here, if you recall. That's going in. And then we've got the old gland nut that's been modified. Now, there is technically a torque setting for this if you have the proper tool. Like most people, I don't have the tool, so I'm just going to take a pipe wrench and I'm just going to snug it down good and tight so the cartridge can't come out. So we're going to get ready to put the springs and let's finish assembling here. The new ones don't genuinely look that much lower at all than the old ones, although when I press on them, these do seem softer. Presumably because they got more coils on them. So yeah, I guess we'll see. Alright, so I've got the spring compressed. My compressor's there. And I'm just going to put the bump stop on. I ordered, what is that? SB104, the KYB bump stop for the front here. So that's it. Pop the actual stop into the bellows there. Nice. So I've located the spring. There's an actual stop for the spring here stamped into this lower housing. The top part of the spring here is the flatter part, so that'll sit on this top housing here, which does not have any kind of locating feature on it. And then we're going to put the top mount, the bearing in. There is a flat in that hole there, and there's a flat on this threaded rod here. So we're going to line those up, and then we can put the nut on and release the spring compressors. Okay, here we are, finished assembled strut with new lowering springs in, looking good and ready to install in the car. Okay, so I put a scissor jack here under the control arm. I'm going to lift the strut up into the top of the strut tower, and then I'm going to lift the control arm up till it's in place, and then that will hold the strut up while I can start to get fasteners in, seeing as I'm working by myself here. It's always the trickiest part. Okay, we'll get the top bolts loosely on. Okay, drop the washers on. Okay, now the top's done. We'll just get the bottom lined up here. There we go. Make sure we got the bolt holes lined up. Okay, so a bit of fiddling there to get those lined up, but there we go. And we'll do the, Nissan seem to call it torsion link. To me it's like a trailing link, but anyway, we'll get that loosely put on and then we'll go around and torque everything up to the specs. Okay, so got everything on hand tight. Just going to start now torquing things down properly. Okay, so I've set the torque wrench for these two, I've set it to about 65, sort of in the middle. Again, I'll put the actual torque values in the description for you. There we go. Okay, so just going to put the splash shield on next, 3 bolts. I did have to use an ease out to get these out because they were a Phillips head and they were just, he just destroyed the head, so I just bought new bolts for it. Anyway, we'll put this on now. All right, strut is actually back in place now. So the only thing to do now is put the brakes back on. I will have a separate video on brakes, so if you want to see how they go on as well as how they came off, please check that out as well. Alright, so strut is in. I do have to do the sway bar still, but I can't do that till I do the other side, and then I'll install the sway bar. There'll be a separate video for that. Brakes, of course, there'll be a separate video on doing the brakes if you need to look how that goes. And yeah, we're good. We've rebuilt one, converted it over from electronic adjustable to the KYBs here. So I think it's pretty good. The proof, of course, will be in the pudding if we take it out on the road, but that's not going to be happening for quite a while. So meantime, we'll press on, get the rest of the front end done. All right. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Appreciate you checking out the channel and watching the videos. If you enjoyed it and the others on the 300ZX Turbo or any of the other videos on the channel, a like, a subscribe would be awesome. Much appreciated for the channel. And as always, stay safe, drive carefully, and have a great day, everybody.